Welcome to the third course in our Roll20 Masterclass series. My name is Clay, I work at Roll20, and in this video we're going to explore some more advanced features that can enhance your games, like macros, rollable tables, token settings in the Transmogrifier, and custom effects tools. So each of these can go very deep. We're going to provide a lot of resources in the description to the syntax that you have to use for macros and custom effects, for example. But really the limit for these tools is your imagination, and there's incredible work being done by the community to design new macros every day. So search around and do some experimentation and see what works best for you and your group. So let's get started. So first we're going to look at token settings. So when you double click on any token, you can see the token settings dialog box. In the previous episode we talked a little bit about dynamic lighting. This is where you would give your token vision should they require it. Just to do a refresher on that, you can always hit Control L to see from the perspective of a particular token or player. And in this case, you can see a helpful tooltip here that says you can enable vision to see what this token sees, right? If I enable vision right there, that's one way to do it, and I can see based on the sources of light and also give them night vision. So that's just a quick refresher on dynamic lighting. Then we'll toggle over to the Details tab. This is where all the essential token settings are defined. The first thing I want to talk about is represents character. This is critical. I have a token named Helga, but it doesn't represent a character, right? It doesn't have to, but if you're using a token to represent an important NPC or a player character, this is where you define which character sheet is connected to that token. There's quite a lot in this Curse of Strahd adventure that I'm using. I'm just going to type in the name of the character, and you can see that this option here, Open Character Sheet, went from disabled to enabled. I can hit Save Settings. Now you can see that I can open the character sheet directly from here. That is how you connect it to a character. I also will show off here how token bars work. Token bars are a way of showing attributes about a character. Now that I've connected it to a character sheet, I can have that synchronized to values on the sheet. One way I can do it is just type in any arbitrary value here. You'll see a bar appears with a 100 value in it. In this case, it is below my token, but I can always put it above. I can always make it a little bit larger. Lots of options for how it is displayed. It's not really that helpful if I have a green bar that might represent HP, for example. But when I go to the character sheet, this doesn't represent their current hit points, right? It doesn't show temporary hit points, max hit points. I'd much rather have this reflect the actual hit points on the character sheet. How I do that is I go to the attributes dropdown. And there's much more than hit points here that I can select, of course. For simplicity's sake, we'll go down to HP and then hit Save Settings. Now you can see if I go to the character sheet and I type in that their hit point maximum 15 and hit Save Settings, then you'll see that now there's a 15 there, right? This now represents the actual HP on the character sheet. This is a really cool feature and important for giving your players more information about a token's status. Next up, we'll look at token tooltips. These can be used in a lot of very creative ways. In this case, I'll have it be a token saying something. The token tooltip is well met, and if I go to Show and hit Save Settings, any player who mouses over this token will see the text well met. That's a very simple way of doing this. If you have your players walk into a tavern and mouse over a token, you can give them an incentive to talk to somebody or to stay away from somebody, depending on what you put in the tooltip space. Not all tokens represent characters, player characters or NPCs or otherwise. Some tokens are a wall or a chest or a fire or you name it. In this case, I have a web token down here. Of course, it doesn't represent a character, although it could. For that tooltip, I'm going to say something like, Gossamer strand of spider webs blocks the way, but gives lightly to the touch. And hit Save Settings. But now let's say, oh, I'm Helga, and I'm proceeding down this staircase. And, oh, I've hit an obstruction. If I mouse over it, I actually get a bit of detail about what it is. And this, as a GM, is a really cool and underappreciated feature that you can prepare a lot of fun Easter eggs for your players that don't require you to voice over what they're looking at. It gives a little bit of a thrill of discovery on the player side, and I really love seeing people use token tooltips this way. So going back to the Token Details tab, we covered token bars, and we covered representing a character, and we covered tooltips. Now at the bottom of this page, there's token auras. Auras are a great way to visually represent a token's area of influence. It could be their attack range or their healing range, the range of threat, you name it. So you can define the tint, color, the shape, and the radius of a shape in feet. I've had it set to this healing yellowish color. We could say this has a radius of 5 feet in a circle. And then there you go. You can see it now as the GM. And you can also mouse over the additional settings here and give players the chance to see or edit up to 2 auras per token. You can have these overlap as well. I could have a 10-foot green circle outside of the yellow circle. There's lots of ways to creatively represent different status effects doing this. I can change the shape to a square for one or both of these. Really important to remember the player permissions for each of these. So you may want to strategically hide or show information from your players about various auras that a token might have. Now we're going to move on to macros. Macros can be super powerful in Roll20. They can help you automate repetitive, tedious tasks and also add a lot of depth and unpredictability to your campaigns. From my experience, a lot of people think that some of the more advanced functionality they see in Roll20 is actually the result of a mod script, and that is sometimes the case. But it is just as often what you're seeing is a macro, and macros are available to everybody for free. Every GM on Roll20, every player can take advantage of macros. There's lots of modules and adventures in the Roll20 marketplace that come with these included, and Cursive Shroud is no exception. But you can see from the list on the right here, some of the broad categories these fall into. This one is a random encounter simulator. This one randomizes the contents you get from a giant spider cocoon. But it's very often used to randomize encounters, but also give players more control over their abilities and give GMs more information about the status of the campaign. One thing you can enable is the macro Quickbar. You can see if I enable this, it shifts up your portraits and names here on the bottom. You can add macros to the Quickbar, which then makes them just one button click away at all times. That's the macro Quickbar. Now we're going to explore some very simple macro examples. If you want to create a new macro, you can simply hit the Add button at the top here, and it will add a, by default, untitled macro to your list. Let's call this one Emote. The syntax can be as complex as you want it to be, but I'm going to show some simple examples and build on top of them. We're going to include a guide to this in the description so you can go as into the weeds as you want. For this example, we're just going to do a simple text chat macro, where we're going to emote and say, well met. An action can include all of the text chat commands. Out of character speech, emotes, whispers, talking to yourself, effects, things like that. If I go ahead and hit save changes and scroll down to the bottom, you can see emote is now an option. And I'm going to clear my current chat log so you can see it very obviously. If I click on emote in the macro Quickbar, you'll see the notification there that something has been posted to chat, and there it is. I, as the GM, because I'm the person who triggered the emote, am emoting and saying well met. Okay, that's simple, right? You could also change this to be a whisper. Any of those text commands will work in the macro syntax. Now we'll try something a little more interesting, the SpeakAsNPC macro. If I go and see the definition of this, this is going to use a chat command again. /as allows you to speak as a different character. I'm going to use @ which is how I insert a variable from a character, and it's going to ask me to choose a token, and then that's the token that will speak. The question mark denotes when you're going to have an input field for users to put in whatever they want. After the pipe here, the vertical line, there's what the default text will be. I'm going to do it as Leaf, and then have them say, hello friends. Submit. And that's how it works. You can see in the macro here, even the markdown, which again will be in the description, is we wanted it to be bold, and it's bold. Next up is PartyStatus. This is very different than what we've done so far. It is going to output a block of content to the chat. I'm going to go ahead and clear off my chat so that it's all fresh, clear the chat log, and I'm going to hit test, and then you're going to get to see this side by side with the definition. The template is what defines how this output looks. There's a solid color for the header and then alternating color rows for as many options as I wanted to include here. The actual use case for this is to reveal the status of my party. I can see the AC and the current health over the max health of the two characters that I've added to the macro. The name in curly brackets is the headline of this table. Then when we open curly brackets again, we are putting in the different options. These will be separated in this syntax. Revenant is the label, and everything after the equals is what we're going to pull from the character's variables. It's referencing a character, then there's a pipe, and then what attribute of that character do we want to pull? In this case, it's AC. Next, we want to pull their HP, And then there's a slash, and we want to show their max HP, so how much they currently have over how much they could have. Imagine having 10 people in your party. This could be a very useful one-click way to check on where everybody is instead of juggling through a dozen character sheets to try and figure that out. Now we're going to show off macros for presenting users with a drop-down so it's interactive, and also including some randomization in the form of a roll. Let's make a macro for HealingSpell. We're going to put two options to start to keep things simple. So the question mark is how you set off a macro that's going to give users a input. We've seen this before when we did the SpeakAsNPC macro, but in this case we're going to give them a drop-down. Open the curly braces to initiate that, and what's the name of things in the drop-down? Spell, followed by the vertical pipe character. It's a vertical line and is very heavily used in the macro syntax. It's right underneath the backspace key on most standard keyboards. It is hard to see here because it's next to some L's. Now I'm going to start listing out the options that I want to present users with. First one, light heal, followed by a comma, and then from here on out is what will be displayed in the chat if a user selects this option. So light heal, and then target regains. Now if I wanted to put a roll here, there's multiple ways to do that. Best syntax for this would be 2 square brackets. In this case, I don't have to type /roll in order to roll something. I just type the number of dice and how many sides those dice have. You could also do adjustments in here and, for example, reference a variable like a character's dexterity or something. Anything that would need to be supported by the system is possible, but for simplicity's sake, we're just going to roll 1 6-sided die. 1d6 HP. And these options are going to be separated again by the pipe character. I find it easier when I'm listing out options in a macro like this to copy and paste them and then make the changes I need to make. We'll call the next option medium heal. Medium heal, target regains 1, let's say 2d6 on the medium heal. If you want to close out these options, you have to close the curly brackets. So I'm going to hit save changes. The name of this is HealingSpell. I could use the macro Quickbar. I've already put it in there. Or I can use the hashtag. You'll see that it's going to pre-fill if I start typing characters. If I hit enter, I see spell, colon, and then a drop-down where I can select those. So I'm going to go ahead and do medium heal. And I roll a 5 and a 1. If the player or the GM wants to see the breakdown of how the roll went, you can always mouse over this and it'll show you specifically what you rolled. Let's say I wanted to add another option here for the super heal. And just for fun, we'll call it extreme heal. We're going to roll a 5d20 plus 200. Really sharp escalation there from the medium heal. This time I'm going to trigger it by hitting the HealingSpell button in my Quickbar, go down to the extreme heal, hit submit, and here come all the dice. 252 HP, really the plus 200 at the end doing the heavy lifting there, but I did get a 20, so that's pretty cool too. Macros also can reference rollable tables, which will be our next topic. As I mentioned before, this is the official Curse of Strahd module you can get on the Roll20 marketplace, and it comes with dozens of pre-made macros, decks, rollable tables, stuff that saves GM's time and add a ton of fun and flexibility and unpredictability to your campaigns. You can see in the macros here, the ones that were already created when I purchased the module. There's random encounters, there's contents of a giant spider cocoon, there's a magic item table. These have one thing in common, and it's that they reference a rollable table. This will be our transition into the rollable table section. Let's say that Helga went down this staircase, saw the tooltip there. She managed to make it past the spider webs, and found a giant spider cocoon. And I, as the GM, want to randomize from a preset list of options what's in the cocoon. I can either put it in the Quickbar or trigger it right from here. What's in it? A Barovian witch who screams like a wild animal and begins casting spells. Pretty dramatic. Let's open up the handout and see where that came from. This is a macro that is referencing a rollable table. I clicked because I wanted more information, and it is opening this journal entry. If I scroll down to G for giant spider cocoon, I can see where this came from. The cocoon's contents is a rollable table, and Barovian Witch who screams like a wild animal is one of 6 options. I rolled a 2 essentially when I triggered that macro. Rollable tables are used for loot tables, but also for determining what monsters are in a random encounter, for example, or in a dialogue tree how someone reacts to a provocation of some kind. Macros and rollable tables are used together pretty frequently, and rollable tables are also very powerful. One very popular use case for rollable tables is creating a shape-shifting token. This is especially relevant for the adventure that I'm in. On the Collections tab, it starts with macros. Then there are decks, which the Taraka deck is a big part of Curse of Strahd. That's already here, ready for me to use. Then there are rollable tables. Here's where you define, for example, we just did the Giant Spider Cocoon contents. Here's where those items are defined. You can always go in and edit the rollable tables right here. But you can also see in this list that there are some great examples of shape-shifting tokens. A werewolf is a classic version of a shape-shifting character. You can see in this rollable table, it's selecting from what form the werewolf is going to take at any given time. A hybrid form, a wolf form, a male human form, a female human form. And each of these have a very cool looking illustrated token attached to them. Werewolf is already set up for me as a rollable table, but I'm going to actually create my own. So if you hit add under rollable table, it will create a new table at the bottom of the list. We'll call this shapeshifter. And then I'm going to create my own, not a werewolf exactly, but conceptually something similar, where I'm going to take some art from my library here. This one's the Raider. And let's say that's one form that my shapeshifter could take. Let's say that a guard is another. So if I hit item, guard, drop that in, and we'll do one more. There is a weight option here, and it is not actually the inventory weight. It's weighting within the rollable table. Weighting is where you can determine the likelihood of these table items being selected. That's our shapeshifter rollable table. Now, if I go back to this tab, you can see that it appears here. And if I hit the token button, you will see, if I zoom out, that it has been dropped out onto the page. So here's that rollable token. Why don't I go ahead and double-click it and give it a character sheet. We'll give it the assassin character sheet. We'll give the token bar the HP attribute. Boom. Now we have tied to a character sheet a character that we can interact with, but it's a token that can shapeshift. So if I right-click it and go to the context menu, I'll see this multi-sided option. And this is determined by the result of the rollable table. If I go to random side, it'll show me in the chat what I just did, and I rolled one of the three options, and I got this one. I could also, in the multi-sided menu, pick which side I'm transforming into. This is useful for all kinds of things, not just werewolf. There's both the randomization and the choosing side. There's druids who have multiple different animal forms. Shape-shifting tokens are powered by rollable tables, and rollable tables are available to all Roll20 GMs. Next up, we're going to look at the Transmogrifier, which is a completely different category of feature. It's on a different tab. If you go to the settings cog, and then miscellaneous, that's where you see a button to open the Transmogrifier. The Transmogrifier is simply a tool that allows you to copy assets from one campaign to another. Let's say I wanted to copy something from an old Curse of Strahd campaign into this one, or vice versa. And it doesn't matter which side you open these on. It's not like you can only drag from left to right, for example. You can also drag from right to left. Right happens to be the game that I have open. If I wanted to export something into this old game, I could. And the Transmogrifier covers all sorts of different things, not just pages, but characters. Got a long list in these. Decks, critical for these handouts. It covers macros, right? If you invest a ton of time in making macros in one campaign, why bother having to do that from scratch? You can actually see a good illustration here in the revived version of Curse of Strahd, how many more macros were added. Let's say I wanted to go back. I wanted to bring the daytime random encounters over into the old game. I drag that over, and you can see it show up here in green. That means that it's already completed. If I was to open this other campaign, I would see this macro represented there. It's a really powerful tool that's available to pro subscribers only at this time. Lastly, I'm going to cover the effects tool and specifically custom effects. Effects, if you haven't used them, are available to all Roll20 GMs. If you go to the effects panel, there's a wand icon. The way this breaks down is there's a general effect type and then an effect color preset. Let's say I wanted this new shape-shifting token to breathe a frost. I can do that in a cone shape, and you can see that breathing frost in Helga's direction. That can be visible to all players on the tabletop, so really useful for spell, healing effects, environmental effects, and things happening on the VTT. You could switch to a glow effect that has more of a holy halo to it. That is how effects work. Effects are also triggerable via macros because they can be used as any old chat. Let's do BeamFX. I have a macro here already defined where I'm typing /FX. This is the chat command to trigger an effect. Then I'm picking the effect type. So in this case, it's the beam type here. And then the dash separates the effect type from the color preset. I'm going to do an acid beam. And then, as we've covered in the past, the @ symbol allows us to insert variables from characters. In this case, it's going to take as a variable the caster's token ID and the foe's token ID. This will make more sense when I test it out. I'm going to go ahead to my chat. Let's see if we do #BeamFX. And I hit enter. Now I'm choosing the target of the caster. Let's do my new shape-shifting token again. And the foe will make Helga just because she happens to be in the unfortunate position of in front of him. And that's it. That's how it works. Today we want to talk about custom effects, which are available to Plus and Pro subscribers on Roll20. Custom effects are very powerful, and let's say that you have some particular idea in mind that is just not quite covered by the options here. Effects in general have a lot of different attributes. They have an angle, a number of particles, obviously various colors, but you may have something in your imagination that is just not covered by the standard ones here, and that's where custom effects come in very handy. If you hit plus on custom effect, you can create a new one. It opens a dialog box similar to the macro dialog box, and we can make it a little bit bigger. And the key part, of course, is the center definition area. There's a blob of JSON attributes here that determine what the effect looks like. So we'll call it my effect. And there is a really great tool maintained on the wiki called the FX Playground that enables you to test these attributes in closer to real time than you can on the tabletop. Let me show you an example. In this case, it just opens the playground and shows me what appears to be a burning fire. This is the attributes that make up that fire effect. It has a number of max particles, a size, a randomization. Let's just reduce size random, for example, to 0 and hit update. You can see that it's layering two things on top of each other, and you can change any of these items. This is now more of a fireball. I'm going to keep this pretty small. The lifespan is how long it lasts. Why don't we do something with a lifespan of 10, hit update, copy this whole thing right over into my definition of my effect. Now, if I go to the drop-down again and go to custom, the custom effect I just created, I can click on that and then trigger it to happen. Now we see in real time what it means for something to have a lifespan. It's how long it actually lasts after I click. Speed, random, gravity, you have CMYK color options. It's probably easier to use a color wheel or selector from somewhere else, unless you really can do these right from your head, which would be very impressive. Now I'm changing the color to be a little bit redder. Let's add some more particles and see how that looks. Let's make the sharpness higher so that there's more definition to these. Sharpness can be an interesting one. Now it looks more synthetic and less like a fire, but if I lower the sharpness, it gives this blurriness again. Lots of different options here. And the angle, if I wanted something to blow in the wind or be like a cone type, I'm going to copy this in again to my effect. If I go back to my effect and hit the cog, I can edit it and hit save changes. If I want to trigger it in a macro, I can do that, right? I mean, I can do it exactly the same way that we just did with the predefined effects. Lots of options here you can do with custom effects, and I encourage you to go in the effect playground, any Roll20 subscribers, and get creative and see what you can come up with. Macros, token settings, the Transmogrifier, the custom effects tool, all of these are just a few of the powerful tools that Roll20 offers that can make your campaigns more immersive and powerful and really delight your players and keep people in suspense. It also helps you avoid dealing with some tedious prep work. Thanks so much for watching. Again, check the description for more links that go into a lot more depth about these features, and we hope you're enjoying the Masterclass series.